Hello, salam, shalom, namaste, sat sri akal, aloha, hola, ciao, bonjour, buna, привет, mabuhay, and jean dobre. It's really, really good to be with you again, and I know you will be very glad you have joined us today because we have a very special guest with us, and it's Redina Adams, who is a drug and alcohol addiction counselor. Welcome, Redina.
Hi, hi. Thank you. Yes.
Redina, please tell us more about who you are and what you do.
I am also a associate marriage and family therapist, so I'm pursuing my licensing to become an actual licensed marriage and family therapist. And then I have a dual, I guess you want to call career, because I also have a certificate as a drug and alcohol counselor. I've been doing drug and alcohol for about 7 years or so. My therapist, I've been doing it for about 3 years now. I raised three young men. They're young men now. They're now 22, 21, and 18. And I had a good time raising them. I did. I kind of miss them being younger because they're my great nephews, and I got them at 8 and 9. And so I tried to do all the parenting things because I knew the day was going to come. But some days I still miss them. I
Yeah,
miss those days sometimes. Yes.
I hear you. They grow up so fast.
Yes, yes. You be like, well, I can't wait till they get 18, 19. And then when they get 18, 19, they become independent. You miss those small moments that you guys shared. Yes.
Indeed. I have nieces and nephews and um it feels like it was just yesterday when they were tiny little babies, and then I have a lot of memories of like playing with them all kinds of games when they were like around 4, 5, 6 years old. And now they've just turned 11 and 12, and they're starting to, get into that phase where, I mean, they're not quite teenagers, but they're definitely
Yes.
starting to develop that sense of independence, and it's just very different interacting with them. They're actually um, starting to have mental health challenges that I'm
Mhm.
like, oh no, and just struggles with school and friends. And
Mhm.
when they were much younger and they would come over to my place, we would find any random thing and figure out a way to play with it.
Yes.
And now it's very much like, no, I have my tablet and I want to play
Uh-huh.
my games on it. So
Yes. Yes. That has social media has taken over even a lot of family time. I noticed that. Yes.
it's interesting, just this past visit that I had with my most recent visit that I had with my niece. I had to literally drag her out with me for a walk because I was,
Mhm.
less screen time. Let's go walking in the neighborhood. And we walked for maybe 10 minutes. And then she was like, can we go back now?
Uh-huh.
Like, fine.
Yes. So she can get back on that phone, huh? Mhm.
Yes, but interestingly, even once we got back, and she definitely wanted to get back to playing her game, but then she had the idea. She was like, "Can I have your phone?" And I was like, "Okay, what
Mm.
to do with it?" And she went ahead and downloaded the same game on my phone because it's like one
Mhm.
of those where you can, it's like you're playing it live with other people. And
Mm.
so then she made a profile for me and she was like, play with me. I was like, okay.
Oh.
So we're going to be sitting next to each other in the same room. But instead of like direct engagement, we are going to be playing through like engaging with each other through the game.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
That's what we at. Yes. People, I've gone to restaurants and people on the same table and they're texting each other. Like, you're sitting right there. I mean, you're texting. Yes, yes. It's to me, it's so impersonal. It takes away from the the closeness that talking gives us, that intimacy. Because you can't tell how a person really feel when they're texting you.
hmm. That's certainly true with texting. In the context of when we were trying to play the game together online, it was interesting because we were literally sitting right next to each other on the sofa, and she actually had to be coaching me because I'd never played the game, and I was like, wait, how do I make myself move, etc. So in some ways, it was a nice bonding experience. But I
Yes.
can imagine that you know, if we weren't in the same room together and we were like just focusing on the game, without her having to coach me and things like that, it would have been substantially different. And I understand that a lot of kids now, this is their norm, that this is how they engage with each other, is like everyone needs their own device. Like you're not playing all even on the same device anymore. I remember there were games when I was my niece's age, like Mario Kart or whatever, and
Mhm.
like everyone was on the same screen, and you might have different what do you call them, the things,
Joysticks.
joysticks, but you were all in the same room, you were all on the same uh, TV screen, and it was like one game that was going on. But now everyone literally needs their own device. Like you need your own phone or your own tablet or whatever, and then everyone's playing on their own thing. And so then you actually don't need to be in the same room either.
Mhm.
And most of the time, apparently, these kids are actually in their own homes, in their separate spaces, and connecting with each other remotely. And while they're able to have a certain amount of interaction in the context of these online games, it is limited. And so it is having an impact in terms of their social skills and
Yes.
what they are and aren't able to learn in terms of social interactions
Mhm.
through this kind of playtime. Um, and so
Say it again.
And so
Mhm.
that also becomes a part of the mental health challenges that they
Mhm.
end up having. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode. Hope you're getting value out of it. For your information, this episode has been sponsored by the Happiness 101 program. Are you a change maker, coach, trainer, or healer? Are chains of fear holding you back from making the impact and income you desire? Using a unique combination of positive psychology and the spiritual wisdom of our most effective change makers, the Happiness 101 program helps you break through your limiting beliefs and manifest the abundance and success you desire with fun and ease. Interested? Book a free Happiness 101 exploration call with me, your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Just use my online calendar link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
Yes. Yes. It really does affect the whole cognitive of our when we think, because the games that they're playing, a lot of them, it's not educational. It's more, some of them are violent games.
Mm,
So when they're interacting with someone, even via the game, they're using foul language. They are fussing. They're being negative.
mhm,
And there is no when I say socialization skills, there's no positive socialization skills. No one's not encouraging others to do better. No one's not trying to coach anyone. It's like if you don't know what you're doing, don't play. And
Mm.
then there's a lot of, like I said, bickering back and forth. And people have hurt their family members over the game because they were so angry to where it was a story that one young man actually stabbed his brother because
Uh-uh.
his brother had won. So it's getting to the point that the violence is carrying into the mind of individuals and causing them to react
Right. Right.
in a violent manner.
Right. I mean, we talk about, how we are in many ways very much a reflection of people that we spend the most time with. And if
Mhm.
what you are spending most of your time with or on is, this online sort of gaming environment context and, so the time you're spending is with these other virtual personas, you know, I mean, for sure, then that has some impact on
Yes.
our um on your perceptions, your way of thinking about who you're interacting with, how you're interacting with them, and so on and so forth.
Yes, it does. It is very impactful at this time. Yes. Impact a lot of households, a lot of young people, a lot of older people. Yes.
Do you, because I know that, your area of specialization, like you mentioned, in the last 7 years or so, you've been doing a lot of drug and alcohol addiction counseling. Um, like, what are like some of the what are some of the challenges that people are dealing with that lead them to this kind of addiction?
It just varies. But a lot of individuals, they have what they call co-occurring. They have a mental illness, which contributes to the drug addiction.
Mm,
And what's happening is that people don't want to take their medication.
uh,
It's a stigma in communities about taking medication. Certain cultural backgrounds feel like if you take medication, you're weak. Um, Certain spiritual backgrounds feel like you have no faith. So it's such a stigma that they're trying to find some way of to cope with trauma they've experienced, cope with depression that they have, cope with being a bipolar schizophrenic, just trying to find a way to cope. And so they're leaning towards drugs to cope with an issue that medication really is needed for. I don't say everybody, but I say a good percentage of people that have drug and alcohol problems also have some type of mental illness.
mm. Yeah, we were talking about kids and games and, and actually that was part of like making me think of the idea of addiction because when people have something like drug or alcohol addiction, people sort of in the wider culture recognize, okay, that's a very serious issue and uh, they have some sense of understanding how negatively it can impact someone's life, how negatively it can impact the lives of the friends and family of the person concerned. But, there are so many other things that people that
Mm-hmm.
we get addicted to,
True, that's
and
true.
these are not recognized as addictions. And
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes things like, like we can get addicted to, for example, gaming or,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
in my case, I have actually had this experience where like I got addicted to mm, gaming and not like these fancy games. At the time when I faced my challenge, I was still a teenager back in Pakistan. And this was like in the mid to late 90s. And we had a very, very basic computer. It didn't have any fancy games on it. The one game that it did have on it was called Tetris. And it's
Mhm.
like this game where, your blocks are falling and you have to arrange them they're different shapes and you have to arrange them to fit in with each other and form rows without any gaps. And because the blocks are falling, there's sort of like a time element where if you don't get it done by a certain time, the blocks pile up and there are gaps in the thingy and it just, then you die. So to speak,
Mhm.
the game ends. So it's like there's like a certain like time pressure that you're dealing with and you have to focus to like
Mhm.
and pay attention to what block is coming where and so on and so forth. And I just got so into it, like I would be spending hours and hours and hours a day just playing this one game. I didn't even have
Yes.
variation. I didn't have other games that I was also playing. It was it. This was it. It was like
Mhm.
hypnotic. Uh,
Mhm.
in its power to keep me sitting there and just I used at that time I used a keyboard, the JKL keys, to move the blocks as they fell sideways and down, kind of a thing. And so just my three fingers and me staring at the screen for hours and hours, you know it's
Mhm.
wild.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yes. And because there are various addictions. There's shopping addiction, shoe addiction. There's sex addiction. There is so many addictions that lead into
Mhm.
unhealthy habits.
Yes.
Okay, so my addictions, if I was a shopper addict versus someone that's on drugs, it's no different. But society still puts them in different categories.
Yes.
And after an addiction is destructive to you because it can destroy your finances, it can destroy your family life, it can destroy your future. You have to hide and lie on both ends of the spectrum. And so the thing in mental health is identifying where those challenges are and processing them, and then finding another way to react. So, for example, if I have a shoe addiction or I have a sex shop addiction, okay, I know that the internet, we can shop online a lot.
Mhm.
So I have to either find a way not to look at the shoes that's online or the clothes. I have to stay off of online for a while.
Mhm.
But because I might say, oh, that's not hurting nobody. I'm just buying clothes. I'm just buying shoes. I'm just doing whatever.
Yeah.
Versus somebody that's using drugs or but it really is hurting somebody because financially, if you look at your credit card statement or you look at your finances every month
Yeah.
and you see where you are where you are overindulging,
Yes.
it's an addiction. It's hurting someone. And
Yeah.
so I think we have to stop stereotyping people according to their addiction. That
Yeah.
you got a bad addiction, you got a good addiction. There's no good or bad addiction. It's addiction with bad results or negative consequences. Because
Yeah.
it's going to take over you eventually. You have sex addiction where you use it, you want to have sex, not because you love the person, because you're trying to feel them more, you're going through whatever you've gone through, you might be molested. So now you feel like you want to be in control. So those are areas that you have to really be truthful with yourself. And like I said, we can't just say one is bad because all of them have a negative consequences that can be lasting.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Like I remember, I mean, I'd never got physically violent, but I definitely felt upset with my
Mhm.
family, like my mom, when she tried to pull me away and
Mhm.
like, come eat, come out, we are going out. And I was like, no, I don't want to.
Mhm.
And I would get upset and I would like resist. And all I wanted to do was like stay home and stay in front of my computer and keep playing my
Mhm.
game. It was that. And then I don't know, but the before actually it was interesting because before I got into this gaming addiction, I had another. I mean, I don't like to think of it as an addiction, um, but again, it's like more of a, I guess, social thing where it's more considered acceptable. But I used to always have my nose in a book. And like constantly, like I would have my nose in a book and um I didn't want to let go. I didn't, again, I was avoiding spending time with my family and missing meals, etc., because I was too busy reading. And like I can now look back at all of that and I can clearly see that I was a traumatized child and I was, just trying to escape, my sense of trauma and because I didn't know how to cope with my emotions. And
Yes.
so for me, anything that just kept me from having to think about my own negative thoughts that, were prone to keep going in my mind or feeling the bad feelings that I didn't want to feel, so I was looking for ways to escape and like my escape, you could like now I think about it and I was like, well, you know, at one level it was like, yeah, okay, I didn't fall into drugs or I didn't, do
Mhm.
alcohol. So in some ways, it was maybe a little bit better in terms of um, like, I mean, uh, with drugs and alcohol, I mean, I don't know. It's like there's added impacts on your body and so forth. And so, but yeah, it's still not like, it's still not okay, and
Mhm.
we're still trying to escape something. And
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
And that's how and that's why people feel like drugs is so like the worst addiction. But it's not because every addiction has a negative consequence.
yeah,
So it may not impact your body, but it's impacting, say, your finances, or it's impacting your family life or your marriage.
yeah,
And that's still being destroyed. People who work are workaholics. They're never home with their family. They lose precious time with their children. They cause a rift with the relationships with their children because the child is saying you're never there.
mm,
Then if you are trying to escape reality with some, even like the reading, you're living inside of what you're reading.
yeah,
Most people escape it through romance knowledge novels or something positive, and they're living their life based on that. And what happens is you begin to actually live that, try to live that life that you're reading.
yeah,
The Brady Bunch, everybody wants to be like the Brady Bunch. If you come from a dysfunctional or a family that wasn't close. So you try to soap operas. Now they got hip hop, reality shows. People are trying to live through them. They're trying to imitate what they see. That's still a negative consequence because it's not really who you are as a person.
yes,
You're
yeah,
somebody else, and you're someone else that's really not who they are because they're going on a script. Or if you're on drugs, you're going on how the drugs is leading you. You're alcohol, you're going on the effects of the alcohol that it has for you to be sociable. So some people they drink so they can be social butterflies
mm, yeah,
because if they're not drinking, they're shy.
yeah,
So now you're still not being yourself because you need something to cause you to come out. And it's long-term effective. Some addictions can be quick, negative, some can be long in the long run.
yes, that's right, that's right. And so, what do we do? Like, if we, I honestly believe that pretty much every one of us has some kind of an addiction or that other that we have experienced in our life or that we may be experiencing in our life right now. So one thing obviously is to recognize what
Yes.
our particular addiction is, because a lot of times we don't, as we were saying, because society has different labels for things, we don't always
Mhm.
recognize that the problem that we have or the thing, the behavior that's causing a lot of problems in our lives is actually a form of addiction. So that's
Yes.
that awareness. But once we have an awareness, or actually, how do we, I mean, do you find that awareness, gaining the awareness that we actually have a problem, um, in terms of addiction, is that even a problem? Do people?
Yes, because you have to confess. If you look at even the 12 step, it says acknowledge.
Mm,
Until you acknowledge that I have a problem, you're living a lie.
mm,
And when you say, oh, I don't really have to do this, or I can slow down, or okay, I'm going to do it just a little bit here, you're lying to yourself because to see myself with an addiction, in my mind, possibly it's another way of seeing myself as a failure because
mm,
now I've allowed something else to control me.
yeah.
But awareness and compassion is really a healing. It doesn't mean that you are a failure. It just means that you have an issue that's real that
Mm,
needs to be addressed like anybody else have an issue. It doesn't set you apart.
yeah.
And so confessing, acknowledging, being aware is the first step. But
Yeah.
the willingness to be aware and the willingness to confess and the willingness to acknowledge it is really the first step.
Yeah. So how do we cultivate that willingness?
By encouraging,
Yeah.
by accepting people where they are
Mm,
and encouraging them where they want to go. You know, people's not going to change when you want them to change. It
mm,
may take some people 5 years, it may take these people one day.
mm,
You can't change them. You have to accept where they are. Now, you don't have to allow them to make you feel guilty, or you can't enable them. So we got to stop enabling people that have addictions.
mm,
Stop enabling them. Stop trying to rescue them. Some people need to fall. They always say when you fall, you look up. When you fall flat, you got to look up to see there's something greater. And so, like even in 12 steps, it says acknowledging a God of that choice that's greater than you.
mm,
And so there's 12 different steps in each step, but the first one is accepting and acknowledging that you have a problem and that there is a greater entity. Like me, I'm a Christian. For you, it's you're a Muslim. So whatever, some people use a doorknob, whatever they say, whatever you need to acknowledge and realize there is someone greater than you that can help you.
mm. Yeah, just something like it could even be that, your family or your community.
Yeah.
So something that you recognize as, yeah, I'm part of this greater whole and I
Mhm.
can ask for help and receive help uh,
Yes.
from, whether it's my family or my friends or my larger community, etc. So it's like not I'm not alone and I don't have to do this alone. And
Mhm.
it would actually be really difficult, maybe even impossible to do it all by myself. And so it's actually really important to try and connect and ask for help and seek some support.
Yes. Like people don't know that AA was really a spiritual
Mm,
component. I think that spirituality is one of the most main ingredients because it is allowing some who you acknowledge as your God, that you realize that there's a higher, greater someone that's more stronger that can help us get through it. And I like what you said, the family comes together. But some people have messed up with their families and
Right.
their communities.
Yeah. Yes, I think that is where the spiritual sense of connection
Mhm.
is perhaps oftentimes really needed because, for people who are not spiritually connected, who don't have a spiritual faith or tradition that they associate with, um, and you're like, okay, well, where can you go for help and support? It's like, okay, family, community, other people, basically, a lot of times that's what it comes down to. But people are not perfect. They're inconsistent. And oftentimes, even when they have good intentions, they don't know how to help you in the
Right,
best way,
right.
right? And so this is like a problem that I experienced, for example, um, uh, so the big trauma that I suffered as a child was child sexual abuse.
Mhm.
And for a good 2 decades, I didn't tell anyone about what I had experienced. And so I was struggling on my own to figure it out. And one of the, things that I realize and recognize now uh, is I was surrounded by a very loving family, very
Mhm.
loving, like my mom, my dad, my brother and sister. I know they would die for me, literally die for me if that is what was needed for them to protect me and save me. But number one, I still, got sexually abused, even though they were there. And they didn't know that it happened. But then they also failed to recognize the signs of my being traumatized, of my potentially having been abused, and stuff, because they themselves didn't have the knowledge and the
Mhm.
education to to see the change in my behavior and think, oh, our child could have, like in the context of my parents, for them to think, oh, could something like this have happened to my child? Why has her behavior changed so
Mhm.
much? Why, is she doing this and that she never used to do before? And so even though they were there and they were clearly, like my mom, she even to this day, she remarks on like how at one point I used to be a very talkative child. And, I listened to everything that she said and I did, I would oftentimes take her very literally in terms of being how obedient I was, um,
Mhm.
and so forth. And then she was like, and then you just stop listening to me, and then you don't talk to me you didn't talk to me anymore. You didn't share anything what was going on with you, and so she clearly saw that something
Mhm.
changed
Mhm.
in me, but and she was constantly trying to reach out to me and get me to speak up in various ways in terms of like, how are you feeling? What's going on? But I couldn't speak up, and it never, uh, n- you know, and I think like part of it, like I wonder if my mom had some education about child abuse and, how it can impact a child, if she had recognized the signs, and then she had gotten more specific information and education about how to help a child who had experienced that kind of specific trauma. Maybe she could have helped me in other ways. Um, and we could have seen some different outcomes than we saw in my case. But the fact that she didn't know any better, um, you know, our situation evolved as it did.
Well,
So,
it's I think it's the secrets
mm,
that destroys
mm,
the family. Um, like she was doing what she knew to do, but
mm,
if and I tell anybody, even when it's listening to this recording, if you are abused or if you have been abused, you need to speak out. You can't be afraid to say such and such is bothering me, uncle, brother, sister, brother, whoever it is, and you don't listen to their threats, their manipulation, their lies.
yeah,
No one's not going to believe you.
yeah,
That's not true. And so when we're told that, or when we are even raped, like I was when I was like 18, the shame, no one's going to believe me. And it causes that the victim not to speak out.
mm,
Speak out. That's the worst thing you can do is hold it in because it's hurting you on the inside. And so if whoever's listening, if your parents or if so your close friend, you need to tell someone. You really need to tell someone about that person because it will come back to haunt you, whether in relationships, friendships, even your social life. It will come back to haunt you.
yeah. And as you were mentioning earlier, Redina, a lot of times people who do end up with various kinds of addictions, it's that they have experienced some kind of trauma that they're trying to cope with and escape from. And so
Yes.
even when we're talking about addictions, to understand that connection, that when
Yes.
you keep it inside, you don't seek support, you don't seek help. If you, like for a long time, I was in denial that there was even anything wrong. I was totally in denial and suppression mode for so many years. And, you know, I will say that when it comes to speaking up and speaking out, I agree with you, Adina. It is extremely important that we do so. And it can take us the time it takes us to actually get to the point where we are able to do it. Like for me, I know that one of the reasons it took me so long is because as what I experienced as a child, I was even younger than 8 years old. And
Mhm.
I didn't even have the language to
Mhm.
be able to say, this is what happened to me. I had no idea
Mhm.
how to comprehend, think about what had happened to me.
Mhm.
I just knew how I felt and I
Mhm.
couldn't deal with those feelings. And so the best my brain could do was to go into denial and suppression
Mhm. Mhm.
until it I was like a teenager. I was like almost 14, maybe almost 15 years old, when I first learned about child sexual abuse as a thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And like by reading a magazine article.
Mhm.
And then I was like, oh, I think this is what happened to me.
Mhm.
And so then
Mhm.
finally I had some language, I had some, and a word that I was like,
Mhm.
this is what happened to me. I think this is what happened to me. And it still took me like a few years to actually say it out loud because the other thing that that you mentioned, Radina, is, like people, you're so afraid of being shamed and blamed and not being believed. And that feeling doesn't come out of nowhere. You know,
Right.
it's like people around you, society around you, the movies you watch, the TV you watch, etc. It gives you these messages. They're,
Yes.
and so you're like, oh no, this is how I'm also going to be responded to because this is how I see other people
Mhm.
responding to other people.
Yes.
So it
And that is so true.
yeah.
And that's why it's good when you have a child
Mhm.
to always point to certain parts of the body and let them know if anyone touches you here or there, that's a no-no. So that would be your language, you know, no, or mommy, daddy, such and touch, no, some type of way. And so I've always taught my great nieces and nephews and my nieces and them is that when someone touches you in these areas, that's a no-no. And it's okay to tell.
Mhm.
You have permission to tell.
Yeah.
We need to give our children permission to openly tell. And when they do, believe them.
Yes.
Not not say, oh, that's just such and such, or we're not gonna tell nobody. Shh. No. Give them permission to tell, and then acknowledge that what they're saying is true, and let them see you take actions against the perpetrator so
Mm.
they can feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah. I see a lot of not only like people not taking action against the perpetrator, but actually but like it's really horrible to be told, shh, don't talk about
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
I had that happen to me when I finally came out and I started sharing. Um, like one of the first reactions I got, not necessarily because when I started talking, I was ready to like
Mm-hmm.
go like public, and talk to anyone and just because I was like, one of the reasons why child sexual abuse exists is because of the silence, because people don't talk. And so I actually wanted to talk about it in a very public way, not like talking about graphic details and so forth, but from an educational perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, I realized that, there's something so some of the reaction that I was getting from my family, including extended family members, was, well, why you can educate people about these issues,
Mm-hmm.
but why do you have to say that you got sexually abused, that you
Mm-hmm.
are a survivor yourself? Like, just educate people. I'm like, no, that's not good enough, because again, you have that mindset of hiding, of having to be silent, and there's something that is very like for your mental health, that's very,
Mm-hmm.
very bad for your mental health. I
Mm-hmm.
lived with the negative um, impact of feeling silenced for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
was not willing to do that anymore. And so, but before I could go and publicly, start talking about these things, I wanted to make sure I told my family so that they wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
when I started my public advocacy and education work. So that's why I told my family, uh, uh, and so forth. But I had a lot of like, shh, don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it.
Because the family, they take it, it seems like it's this image. We want our families to be this perfect, this nice, straight, no problem family. But if everybody be truthful, they've had some kind of experience in their family that would what they would consider blemish their image of this perfect family, of this we're lacking problems, especially some to that extent.
Yeah,
And we have to stop caring what other people think about us.
yeah,
Because truth be told, every family has a closet full of skeletons.
right.
I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how much money you don't have. I don't care where you come from. You can be living in Malibu on the top of a hill. You can be in middle class or low income. We're living in the projects. Everybody have that secret.
Yeah,
So what's it to be ashamed of?
Yes. And when we speak out, any one of us speaks up, speaks out, it gives other people the permission to do so.
Mhm,
After I came out to my family, I had another one of my cousins come
mhm,
out. And I was like,
mhm.
oh no.
It brings
And
healing. It brings healing. And
yeah,
that's what's wrong with the family dynamics now. They need healing.
yeah, yeah,
All those quiet kept secrets need to be exposed.
yes.
So the person who's a victim can start their healing process.
Yes. And a lot of times when we talk about what you brought up about not enabling, well, earlier you were talking about it in the context of not enabling the addictive behaviors of those of our friends and family who may have an issue with addiction. But there's also enabling in terms of, like, if you're talking about child sexual abuse, what about enabling the perpetrator to continue to
Mhm.
hurt?
That's it.
And a person who abuses one child is very likely to have done it to someone else, to some other,
Because they were abused.
and they,
Abusers abuse. And if you go back into their history, someone did them like that
Hmm,
somewhere down the line. So it carries on and carries on. And
yeah,
in some families, it's acceptable. It's because he did it to my mother. So now you can do it to my daughter. And it just travels on and it goes on and it has to stop somewhere. Like you said, someone has to say enough is enough. No, we're not going to enable this person and cheer them on and encourage them to do what we know is wrong.
yeah. And it's not even about encouraging or cheering them, but just by not revealing, talking about what happens and how it impacts us, and so forth. You just allow it to continue because if you don't do something to stop the behavior, if you don't do something to change the person's behavior, if you don't do something to help them heal, because you're also absolutely right, Redina, that so many people who engage in abusive behaviors have experienced deep trauma themselves. But it's like, if you don't call it out, if you don't take action to change and heal, you know, uh, everyone really in the family, in the society, and so forth, then you cannot break the cycle.
And
So,
when I say cheering and encouraging, whenever we don't confront somebody, it does make them feel like it's okay. It gives them a form of validation,
yeah,
you
like
know,
a sense of
that
permission.
right. So we are indirectly cheering them and encouraging them because we're not discouraging them. We're
Mm,
not confronting. We're not invalidating. We're not dealing with it heads on. We're closing our eyes because it's not my child yet, or it's not me yet. Because you don't know, you know? And parents, they tend to blame themselves for something that they had no control over. But in families, people know who's doing what because somebody don't whisper it about uncle or grandpa.
mm,
Somebody don't say something. We might ignore it.
right.
And because we don't want to believe that this person would hurt their own child, their own grandchild, their own niece, or their own sibling.
Yeah.
We live. It's like an illusion of disbelief. Once again, because we don't want to see it for what it really is. And
Right.
that's what happens in mental illness as well. You don't want to see that you have a problem.
Yes.
You don't want to believe it because there's just no way that I could have schizophrenia. I could be schizophrenic. That, especially when it doesn't meet the criteria. I'm not out there talking to myself, or I'm not
Yes.
walking around dirty. I have a nice house. and I have a mental illness. This is no way. I'm educated.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so because we want to hide so much, then we want to stereotype what it looks like to be molested and who the molester is. It's supposed to be the next door neighbor, the creepy guy down the street, the creepy woman down the street,
Yeah.
when it's the own person in your own house.
Yeah. Right. And even when it comes to like people with various addictions, like we were saying, we have stereotypes, right? And certain kinds of behaviors we recognize as problematic, as addictive, and others we just it's so normalized in our culture and our society that we won't even recognize that those behaviors are problematic.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And also, it doesn't matter. Addiction is addiction,
yeah,
whether you're a doctor or a person on the street.
yeah,
It's an addiction.
yes.
It doesn't matter if you sit on a judge, if you're a judge or whatever your title may be, versus somebody that's sitting on the side of the curb. You're
Yeah.
still addicted. You're still destroying lives. You're still destroying your own life. You
Yes.
just have the money and the resources to carry on in your addiction. So what they have to do, you don't got to do yet. But it's going to come to a time where you will have to do something. Because addiction doesn't stereotype.
Yeah.
And I think when we get out of that stereotype of what an addict looks like, or what a person with a mental illness look like, or what somebody been traumatized look like, there's no look to it because it's I call it like that. Remember the movie? I don't know if you remember The Invisible Man. He was there, but you couldn't see a sitcom. I'm telling my age because it was a sitcom years ago called The Invisible Man, right? And he was invisible, but he was there.
Mm.
Well, addiction and all that's that invisible man. You
Mm.
can't always see it depending on who's in around, but it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mental illness is that invisible man. You can't see it, but it's there.
Yes. Yes. So, okay. So awareness, acknowledging, confession, a really, really critical first step. What do we do after once we have acknowledged and confessed?
You have to go through a transformation because you lived a certain life for so long and you're familiar with that life. So
Yeah.
once you acknowledge it, then you have to find out, really discover what is making me do this. Acknowledging your trauma,
Mm.
acknowledging uh, whatever has caused you to get to this place.
Yeah.
I use this scenario whenever I was with any client I have, whether it's mental illness, whether it's whatever it is. I use it as a house and I get on a vision board and I say, okay, your life is this house, okay, but you're moving to a new house now.
Mm.
Tell me, what would you take and what would you not take?
Mm.
So we list the negative things in the house, which is symbolic of the life. So if I'm going to a new life, am I going to take old friends?
Mm.
No. Am I going to take old attitudes? No. Old character. Let's talk about the character behaviors. So then I tell them, okay, well, we're traveling to this new house, but there's going to be stops on the way. There's going to be construction. There's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be obstacles to get there. So what do you do? Do you stop and go back to the new house? No. The old house? No. You deal with the obstacles that you've been hiding with drugs and alcohol and whatever your addiction is. You face them. So
Yeah.
because triggers, we call them triggers. They're going to come. Those triggers are going to come. So for example, I love shoes, for example. Okay. I can have a shoe addiction. So what can be my trigger? I turn on my computer and there's a picture of some shoes. And not only just a picture, but it talks about these shoes on sale. That's a trigger.
Yeah.
Because I know I can't afford the shoes anymore, but I want the shoes because it's like I gotta have it.
Yeah.
So what do? I have to stop and ask myself, first identify that's a trigger. Secondly, I have to stop and ask myself, do I really need these shoes? Or maybe you have to block advertisements of shoes. Or
Mm.
maybe stop your computer for a while. Just have it where you can only, like if you can just say you can do your work, but you don't have to see, because you can take the news off your fucking, you can take your news off your computer, which brings up advertisements. Or you go to the store, maybe you can take somebody to the mall with you that
Mm.
can keep you focused
Yeah.
until you get stronger.
Yeah.
So you have to know your triggers. You have to know what's going to cause you to take that step back. So if I'm on my way to my new house, okay, I find my trigger. Okay, so I have to learn to face it and keep going.
Yes.
I can't go back to my old ways and say, oh, well, this time I'm going to get these shoes, but I'm not going to get them next time. I have to stop right then and there and make a change there.
Yeah.
So then when I see that I did it, then I have to reward myself.
Yeah. Mm.
And the more that you reward yourself with praise, oh, you did a good job. You might have to hug yourself and say, oh, I'm so proud of you. You know, you
Yeah.
might tell somebody, oh my God, I didn't buy them shoes. You know, that's your girl, this is so great. You see, and
Yeah.
as you use, they say take 21 days to break an old habit. You do something for 21 days, you bring a new habit in. So I tell them, so what are you going to take to the new house? And so when we then figure out, what do we want over here? And that's an incentive. I'm not going to take this over here. I'm not going to take, if I know that I need to get high and I get soon as trouble come, I want to get high. I'm not going to call my high buddies. I'm going to call people that's living the life that I want to live now.
Yes.
I'm not going to, and if I mess up, if I fault, I'm not going to sneak. I'm going to confess it. I'm going to expose it. Yeah. And I'm not going to have high expectations of myself. I'm not going to act like I cannot fall because I can. I have to be real that I can't handle this. A lot of people's problem is they don't know how to be real and say, I can't handle this.
Mm.
It's like a girl, if you know that you're gonna kiss somebody that's gonna lead you sexually, don't be kissing. Because you know you can't handle it. Oh, I can handle it. And then you end up in the bed. Okay, here you are a believer and you end up in the bed. Now you're crying because you have to be real with what you cannot handle.
Mm.
If I have a pocket full of money, I better go to the mall because I'm gonna see some shoes and I'm gonna buy them. So I can't handle that. So I have an accountability partner.
Mm.
And it's okay. It doesn't make you weak to have an accountability partner. It actually makes you strong. It doesn't make you weak to say, I can't handle certain things. It actually makes you strong.
Right. And it won't be true forever that you can't handle this or that. It's
Right,
just a matter of
right.
getting through that period where you're trying to create that change.
But let me stop there. Even if it is forever, it's
Yeah.
okay. We all have a We all have that thorn. We all have that something that we got to deal with.
Yes.
You're right. We may not, but what if we do? It's still okay. And my thing I tell anybody, it's okay to be you.
Yeah.
It's okay not to have it all together. It's okay not to be flawless. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, you know what? I like to date, but I can't hold your hand. Or you can't stay at my house at 10 o'clock. Does that make me a bad person? No, it makes me human. Because we all struggle. I used to tell my young men when they were growing up, you're not going to be good in every subject at school, and it's okay. Like me, science, I'm horrible at science. I am horrible. Never got a good grade in science. I think one time maybe. And when I was in college, I kept dropping science to the very end. And even then, I had to ask the science teacher, can he give me extra credit? Okay. Now, math and reading, so I tell mine, if you're not good in it, it's okay. As long as you know you tried. So if you get a C, you tried. And that's what I think we have to learn, to accept the things we cannot change, to accept ourselves for who we are, what we have. Look at our gifts and talents and accentuate them.
Yes.
And anything that our trauma, we came through it, we made it, we survived. We're not victims no more. We're survivors. And it's hard. So what happens is people, they stop loving themselves. They don't see themselves as valued because of what they've done. That doesn't make you valued. It makes you very valuable because now your experience will be a benefit. Like I have a mental illness. Okay, I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian for a long time. Okay, I preach, I teach, I've done all that. But I have a mental illness. And it's real. It's not a spirit. It ain't the devil. It's something that I was born with. But being in church, it was, you don't have faith.
Mm.
Bind and rebuke it. That spirit of depression. So I lived in the lie. I lived in a bubble of frustration
Yeah.
and hopelessness until it caused me to have a breakdown.
Mm.
But then I realized, no, it's not a spirit, it's me. And even today, I still have people say, girl, you didn't rebuke that depression. I'm like, no, I'm depressed. I'm not going to rebuke nothing. It's real. I'm taking my medication. I'm going to take my medication and I'm going to deal with the triggers that causes me to feel depressed.
Yeah.
The medication does not heal me. It stabilizes me to be able to identify when those feelings are coming upon me
Mm.
and that it can make me handle them differently.
Yes. Yeah, because sometimes, oh my gosh. Um, I mean, there's so many different, like our health and well-being in some ways there can be a little bit complicated for us to
Mm-hmm.
figure out in terms of what's going wrong and why, because there's potentially so many different influences. I have been through, like in my late teens, I went through some severe depression, and actually part of it was definitely that the old trauma, like I was at an age where that trauma was starting to come up, and when your mind, your body, etc., they feel ready to deal with it to whatever extent, it will start to surface. So there's definitely some of that. I had developed hypothyroidism,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't getting treatment for it because it was not diagnosed. And it
Mm-hmm.
turns out that if you have hypothyroidism and you
Mm-hmm.
are not getting treated for it, um, it can also cause depressive symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have hypothyroidism, it's literally, your entire metabolic system is slowing
Yes.
down, and it's slowing down, slowing down, slowing down. And so the body doesn't have enough energy to
Mm-hmm.
keep working at a normal pace. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you are not getting treatment and you're continuing to trying to push your body to act normal, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't, you literally don't have enough energy, enough capacity. And on top of
Yes.
that, I was dealing with the trauma of being sexually abused as a child. So it got to a point where my body was like, no, we just cannot keep pretending everything's normal. And it
Mm-hmm.
literally forced me to just, like, I couldn't get out of bed anymore. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was just so like depressed that I didn't want to do anything. I wasn't taking showers. I wasn't brushing my teeth. I wasn't, I would barely, get up to eat. And that was after my mom badgered me, and got mad at me for not eating,
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes, and once I got diagnosed as having hypothyroidism and I started taking that medication, it took like a week or two. Um, but then I started feeling an impact. I started
Mm-hmm.
feeling a sense of more clarity in my mind, and even though I was still dealing with some of the other trauma and the impacts of that in terms of my mental health and stuff. But there was this other aspect that was the being caused by the lack of treatment for the hypothyroidism that had just made everything worse and more difficult. Um, and so once I started taking my medication, it definitely eased the the situation.
But see, you said the key word. You took your medication.
Yeah,
If you never took the medication, the symptoms would have stayed there. And that's the same way with the mental illness. You take your medication.
yeah,
You have an illness. And
yeah,
just like you had a physical illness, an ailment, it's the same thing. It's an ailment. It's an ailment of the mind. And you take it. You take your medication and you see it's like the fog comes out your eyes and everything become clear.
yeah,
And so that's the key. Take your medication and take it as as prescribed.
mhm.
Don't take it because you're feeling better. Because see what happens if you just start taking it and felt better, stop taking it, then the symptoms would have returned.
Right.
So
And
the reason for taking it is for the symptoms to go away to get better.
yeah, and that you have to at the same time, like oftentimes it's medication is just there to support.
Yes.
It's not enough on its own because after I started taking the medication, after my diagnosis, it did also happen a few years later. I was going through another really difficult point in life where I mean, it wasn't as bad as the when I was in my late teens, but I was like now a few years later, and I was going through another depressive episode. And at that time, I actually stopped taking my medication because I was just too depressed and I was like, I don't care. I don't want to feel better. I don't even want to live. I became passively suicidal. And so I
Mhm,
was like, I'm just not going to take my medication. I'm going to stop. And then if I die, I will die. And I don't care if I die. So it's like because what had happened in the meantime was I hadn't done enough healing in other ways. So
mhm,
yes, I was taking medication, but the other aspects of the trauma that I was dealing with and the mental health issues that I was dealing with, um, I hadn't addressed them enough. I hadn't done enough healing work. I hadn't seeked enough help and support
mhm,
to work through those, And so then again, I got triggered into a state where the depression became strong again,
mhm,
and then I
mhm,
was, and then then there was some, it was like literally getting to a point where um, like um, where things got so bad again that, again, it was my family that pulled me back up and out of it, where they were like,
mhm,
"Uh, what are you doing? Let's go back, see the doctor." Like literally my mom, no, it was my sister, I think, who had to make the appointment for me
mhm,
because I just let my prescription expire. I didn't have any more medicine, and
mhm,
so they were like, and at that time, thankfully, my family started to recognize the symptoms of,
mhm,
oh, why is Samia like feeling so um, like down in her energy, and I had started gaining weight and things like that. And so
mhm,
at that time, my family had enough awareness to be like, hey, is her thyroid acting up again? And
mhm,
they were like, are you taking your medicine? Maybe your dose needs to be adjusted and stuff. You
mhm,
every way to go for your next checkup. And then it all came out that, oh, I'd not taken it for several months, my medicine.
mhm,
I don't even have a valid prescription anymore. And I didn't bother making an appointment with the doctor. All of
Mhm.
that, and so literally my sister was the one who made the appointment, and my dad drove me, and my mom badgered me to go, and then they
Mhm.
picked up my new prescription, and my mom would stand there and watch me, and like, did you take your medication? Here's your medication, take it. And so you do need, help and support.
Mhm. You do, and then you also have to have an active life. I mean, once you take medication, you have to change your diet. You have
Yeah.
to exercise. You have to be around, have a support team. All of
Exactly.
all that is a role to play after you take the medication. The problem is people are not taking their medication. They have the support. They just because they don't want the stigma of having to take medication, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to mental illness, that you're crazy stigma.
Yeah.
Oh, you better stay away from her because she or he crazy. And it causes a lot of backlash from taking it. But
Mm.
I'm once again the same thing is that if you want to feel better, you got to take it. You got to be an active participant in your healing because your mother could have took you, your father could have taken you, your sister. But if you chose not to be an active participant, and we have to be advocates for ourselves and realize where are we at and what we're in need of.
Yes. Yeah, I think like for me, I was lucky that the second episode that I had with the depression, like I said, it wasn't so bad. Like I had become passively like, I don't care, I don't, if I die or whatever, but thankfully I wasn't actively suicidal, and so when I got that push from my family, I was willing to let them push me and go along, so that is, and then what you said about, that it's once you start taking the medication, then you also need to be doing the other things. I think that's also a really important key because I think one of the things that I was experiencing in my depressive phase was like, I was like, what's the point of life? Like,
Mhm.
why even bother being alive? I felt very disconnected from any sense of meaning and
Mhm.
purpose to my life. And
Mhm.
so that was actually also part of the healing that I needed, was to find some sense of meaning and purpose to my life.
Yes,
For me,
yes.
what happened was that was around the time when I was like, in college, and I found, um, I joined some clubs on campus where they were actually, engaging in activism around um, sexual abuse awareness and prevention work. And I was like, you know what? If I can stop another child, another person from being sexually abused and hurt and suffering the way that I had to suffer,
Mhm.
then that is something meaningful for me to live
Yes.
for. And that is why I actually got motivated to be like, okay, no, I first of all I have to help myself. I have to begin to get better. I have to build up my capacity so I can, do this work. And I actually went through, like on campus, there they actually had a training program to, like there were like a certification training to become an advocate for sexual violence prevention. And so I went through that training. And then I was like, okay, if I'm really going to do this work and I'm going to come out and do this publicly, that's when I was like, okay, then my family has to know
Mhm.
about what I've been through as a child and all of that. And so, it was definitely like these things are so connected to each other that, you know, uh, yeah,
And purpose, because you have to have a purpose. People have to understand that you weren't born just for nothing,
yeah,
that a purpose came along with you when you was born, and that even though things happen that's unfortunate, we don't discount that, and it's sad and it's hurtful, that you still have a purpose. And that purpose now is to tell your story and help someone else who's living that same story find hope, healing, and happiness.
Yeah, and prevention I think is so important because I'm like, okay, for the people who have already experienced that trauma, yes, of course we want to be there to help them, but I think it's also really important to think about how can we prevent these things from happening in the first place? How can we prevent people getting to that point in their lives where they fall into some addiction in
Mhm.
order to try and cope with these kinds of horrible traumas. And so
Well,
like,
let me stop you there because sometimes you can't prevent certain addictions because people invite their children to use drugs at
yeah.
7, 8, and 9 years old.
Mm,
So in order to prevent it, you got to move them out of the environment. And there, I have a lot of clients. I've had a lot of clients who parents
yeah.
started them using meth
Yeah.
because they were using meth, or their siblings.
Yeah. No, I
And that's
agree
why I
with
always
you.
tell people that purpose is so important.
Yeah.
Because what do you tell somebody who was forced to use drugs or was enticed to use drugs?
Right.
And then we say, how can I prevent that? Well, you couldn't prevent it.
No, not in that instance, but when I talk about prevention, I'm talking about like creating a change in society, where, for example, one of the things that I keep coming back to is this this environment of blaming, judging, shaming anyone for any reason, honestly. It's like if we can work to help each other develop a mindset of non-judgment, of treating each other with compassion and giving each other unconditional love, you know,
Mhm.
no matter what we may be going through in our lives, to come at it from that approach of we're not going to judge each other, we're not going to shame each other, blame each other. And you know what? I'm not going to do that to myself either. Start with
Yes.
myself. And so
Yes.
if we can begin to cultivate that kind of culture,
Yes.
starting with ourselves and with our loved ones that we are able to influence, and then going out beyond that to the larger society, hopefully, um, then so many problems can be prevented.
Yes.
No?
Yes. Yes. And something you said, which is really, I think, really just resonated with me, is you said we start with ourselves. And first thing I would say normally is to somebody this, well, that's how the world is. You know what I'm saying? Uh, that's how the world is, and that's how life. But something you said is so true. Yes, that is how the world is. But if one person starts and then it becomes like a fire and catches on, that's what matters. What are we doing? What am I doing? Am I looking at what other people are not doing and saying, well, it's no sense of doing it because look, or am I saying, well, let me do it. Let me start.
Yeah.
Okay, let me start it. Let me be that person that shows love. We are in such a loveless society, and that's one of our main problems, love.
Mm,
We need to love people, love one another,
yeah.
love and respect each other for who we are, our differences,
Yeah.
honor each other. But because society has another, it's give me who's on top. So what I'm trying to do is me do me, my part.
Yeah.
Not look at other people what they should be doing, but what is my purpose and what am I required to do?
Yes. And the great news for us is that we know that this can make a difference when we make
Yes.
for this kind of effort. It can and does make a difference. Like you can look through history of, how, for example, here in America, if you think about how many cultural changes have occurred in
Mhm.
terms of, I mean, racism still exists, but
Mhm.
there have been so many improvements. Like my dad, he's always reminding us that not too long ago, um, there was a time in America where our family was literally not allowed to come
Mhm.
to America because there was
Mhm.
a ban on Asian immigration.
Mm.
And even if he had come when that ban was lifted and more Asian people started to come here, because we are people of color, we would not have been able to have the same kind of life experience and quality of life that we do now. Uh, in the aftermath of the civil rights movement, that, mostly like, it was like Black people who were leading that movement and struggled. And now my Asian family is benefiting from that struggle, that, Black people went through. And I mean, of course,
And you know, and we're still going through it. And
yeah,
that's the sad thing about it. The 21st century, African American people are still going through struggle. We're still stereotyped. You would think, even if you listen to the election, you would think it's only black or white in this world.
no,
Because that's how they try to gear it towards the blacks, or the whites. And it's like, it's other people in the world that's going to vote, people. You know what I'm saying? Black people are still, we're
yeah,
still behind,
yeah,
even in Hollywood, with black actors being still paid less than their counterparts
yes,
in businesses, in companies, you know. And you're right. Everybody, so many people are benefiting from our struggle,
yes,
but at the same time, we're still arising too.
yes,
That's what I love
exactly.
about us.
Not
We're
stop.
still discovering and arising, and we are elevating, And
Yeah,
I love that. I love that. We're resilient people.
yeah,
And so I'm proud of that part of us, that there are places that we are now able to get in, what I mean, because it's something somebody else had to go. We're able to vote.
yeah,
That's why I vote, regardless of how I felt or who I feel about, because my forefathers died to
yeah,
give me this right. So
yeah.
now I'm going to utilize the rights that I have.
Yes, exactly. It's like the struggle is ongoing, and just to, the point is to appreciate the whatever progress we have made so that
Yes.
we can stay. I think, like, for me, that's a point of motivation to keep going,
Mhm.
because like when I think about, for example, in a slightly different context of when we talk about sexual violence,
Mhm.
sexual violence is also still a serious, major
Mhm.
problem in our society. And
Mhm.
we're still living with stats like 1 out of every 3 women and one out of
Yes.
every 6 men have experienced sexual
Yes.
violence, sexual abuse in their lives. It's crazy. And I have seen progress where there's more people willing to talk about it, more
Yes.
awareness. There is not enough, but there's more awareness, more
Mhm.
education. Like just the fact that, for example, I'm talking about it, and as a result of my talking about it, I've had other people in my family come
Mhm.
and, step up and share what they have experienced. And, and so there's more awareness in my family,
And
you know?
people are believing you now more.
Yes.
And the
Right.
perpetrator is being made accountable for what they've done. And
Yes.
I believe that's a big issue. That's one of the plus, because now a person has a voice and they know their voice is going to be heard and believed, and action can be taken.
Yeah, it's more likely. I mean, we're still having problems like, so when one of my other family members recently came out, and so there were definitely people in our family who believe them,
Mhm.
and who, like myself included, I was like, I'm here for you. Tell me what can I do to support you? And we took whatever, actions we could in terms of holding the perpetrator accountable and so forth. But there were still other members of the family who were in denial, who didn't want to believe
Mhm.
it, who were
Mhm.
like, shh, don't talk about it. So
Mhm.
the struggle continues, but I see progress, and that is encouraging and hope giving to me.
And then you have to bypass the naysayers and keep going because no matter what, you're always going to have somebody that's going shh. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's not even important. What's important is that it's exposed. What's important is healing is taking place.
Yeah.
That deliverance is taking place.
Yeah.
That wholeness is taking place.
Yeah. And even for the naysayers, I think I'm more and more coming to the point where I'm like, if there's something I can do to engage the naysayers and maybe further understand them with more compassion and empathy. Why are they being naysayers? What's going on for them that
Mhm.
has cultivated that uh, that attitude for them? Because at one point in time, or maybe on a different issue, I am challenged in that way, and I'm not willing to face up to something.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's coming back to that idea of let's cultivate a culture, an environment where we don't blame, shame, judge each
Mhm.
other for any reason, but rather
Yes.
try to support each other with empathy and more compassion and more unconditional love.
Mhm. That's
So,
it. You're right. And that's the key. Love is such the key. It is.
mm,
It really is. Love is needed.
yeah, and I think that's one of the most important lessons we learn from Jesus, right? The unconditional
The
love.
love. Yes.
Even for the people who think of themselves as your enemy and try to hurt you, you
Yes.
still love them because you choose not to think of them or treat them as your enemy.
Yes. 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 It can be challenging, but you have to want, when you want to. And that's where I'm at in life. I just to live free in order to live free from past and from things that's been done to me. It's just forgiveness and moving forward love,
Mm,
and because forgiveness is a really big impactor. So many people is walk around with unforgiveness.
mm,
They've been hurt so much. But when you don't forgive, the person that have done any type of harm to you still has control. You have
yeah,
to take the power back and forgive them. It doesn't mean that that they went wrong or they didn't say something wrong. It just means that you're recognizing that is it really worth changing changing who I am?
yeah.
Because some people may or may not change. It does. It's up to us to be who we are.
Yes, and another aspect of forgiveness that I'm trying to work on more for myself is also um like I think again, like applying every lesson to myself first. And so when I think about how I have been really difficult to deal with as a person in my life, for example, for my parents, when I was, my very traumatized self, and also I think another person who was really impacted by my trauma in a negative way was my little sister.
Mhm.
Because when I was very traumatized, I was, and after I got out of my denial and suppression phase, I went into a serious being angry phase. I was
Mm-hmm.
so angry at everyone and everything. And a, a lot of that anger I took out on the people who loved me most.
Mm-hmm.
Like my little sister actually got the worst of it because like even with my parents, I didn't feel I could get away with um, expressing, for example, like I never even thought to hit my
Mm-hmm.
parents,
Mm-hmm.
but I hit my little sister,
Mm-hmm.
because I could get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was one of the very few people in my life that I had more power than,
Mm-hmm.
and so I took a lot of my negative energy on her.
Mm-hmm.
And she forgave me, you know, and she has continued to love me and be one of my biggest points of support actually now.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the context of like when it came time for me, and I was like, okay, I have to tell my family. She was the one who helped me through that process. She literally handheld me through the process of my coming out to my family,
Mm-hmm.
and so like when I think about what, like if she hadn't forgiven me, if she hadn't
Mm-hmm.
loved me so unconditionally as she did,
Yes.
what, like, I don't know if I would have been able to create the level of positive change and
Mm-hmm.
experience the level of healing that I did. Um, I mean, maybe eventually I would have achieved it, but it would have been so much harder and
Mm-hmm.
more difficult. And so when I think about that, um, you know, because like I have to, like, now I'm using language of empathy for myself and explaining what was going on. But the fact
Mm-hmm.
is that um, I literally abused my sister, mentally,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, sometimes even physically, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I was an abuser. So, like, uh, and so like now I'm trying to come to a place where I'm like, okay, what about the person who abused me? Or that, um, can I forgive them? Am
Mm-hmm.
I there yet? Can I work on myself to get to that point?
Yeah. Mhm. That's true. You're right. And we go back to the saying that people who are abused, they end up abusing
Yeah.
some form, some, yeah.
But it's like breaking the cycle, right? Because
Yes.
because of my
Yes.
sister's love for me and her forgiveness for me,
Hmm.
I was able to break the cycle. And thankfully, I no longer abuse her.
Yes.
I
Yes.
hope I don't abuse anyone else either, anymore either. So forgiveness literally allowed me to break the cycle of abuse, of being not only being a victim of abuse, but becoming abusive myself
Yes.
and abusing
Yes.
other people. And so forgiveness, wow, um, I mean, it has so many impacts.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It is very powerful. Again, this is powerful. And it's more powerful than people think it is. It really is.
yeah.
It is. Yes. So, yes, you're right.
Redina, you know what? I couldn't help but keep talking to you. And I know, oh my gosh, we've been talking I've kept you way longer than I told you I would.
It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you for
It's
staying.
been enjoyable.
Oh, thank you for that. Do you have any last thoughts you would like to share? And then, maybe we'll just bring you back so we can keep talking.
That'd be nice. No, I've enjoyed it. I just do want people, well, yes, I think I do, is that one is take heed to whatever your trauma is and get the necessary help.
Mm, yeah.
Get the help so you can function whole to complete your purpose.
Mm,
And you're one perfect example of look, walking in your purpose, walking in healing and wholeness, and able to share it now
mm,
and impact the world with showing that I'm a survivor. And my surviving, look where I'm at now, I'm thriving.
yeah.
And through forgiveness, love and forgiveness. And so I would tell anyone, don't put high expectations on yourself. Meet yourself where you're at and build from there.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
And build from there. Yeah, that's what I would like to say. Yes.
Thank you for those very, very wise words, Regina. And my last reminder to our audience is simply to make sure you check the show notes because I will be dropping Regina's links in there so you can
Oh yeah.
connect with
Thank
her
you.
and get the help and support that you need whenever you're ready for it. So
And
until we connect next time, I wish you lots and lots of peace and joy.